It's the Sod Pod, brought to you by Grassland Agro. The Sod Pod. Hello and welcome to the Sod Pod. This is episode 23. On the last episode we were organising a stag party for Shawnee McMahon. We're down to a coin toss now between Gary Kendi or Amsterdam. And on this episode, myself and John are delighted to be joined by two of the newest members of the product and marketing team, Lauren Stanley and Claire Aspel. Welcome on the show, ladies.
Well, lads, how are we today?
Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on. So first what I might do is, Claire, give us an introduction to yourself.
So I come from a dairy and beef farm in Wexford.
That's great, and thanks for that, Claire. And you've also been involved in some education currently as well. What are you at?
So I've just recently finished my PhD in sulphur nutrition for grassland down with Chuggas down in Johnstown Castle in Wexford, and also up with UCD in Dublin. So for the last 4 years I've been concentrating and running trials on various different aspects of sulphur and how to get the best out of sulphur for your grassland.
That's brilliant, and sulphur's so important, and maybe something that we've forgot about over the last maybe 15 years. And Lauren, over to yourself.
Yes, James.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm flying it. Thanks very much.
So you're technically, you're new to the product and marketing team. You're not new to Grassland Agro. Give us a rundown.
No, so I'm after coming over to the dark side here. I was an agronomist there for the last year. I was in the Carlow region. So yeah, calling around farmers, selling fertiliser, doing the sustainability programme with them, and providing general grassland advice. And there in the last couple of weeks I'm after moving over to the product and marketing team, trying to put a bit of manners on the Clare lads here and James. So I suppose before Grassland Agro I worked in the malting industry. I worked a year for Bort Malt, and then I came over here to Grassland Agro. I'm living in Kilkenny. I am a sheep and tillage farmer. We also do a bit of contracting then as well on the side. And yeah, that's kind of me.
That's great, Lauren. Thanks for that rundown. John, what do you think, having these ladies here to put manners on us?
Brilliant. Did have to work cut out for him, Jim, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah. But no, it's fantastic to have him on board. Especially Lauren, we know her well. She's been around a while, and Claire is bringing a huge amount of knowledge and expertise to the party with her expert insights into sulphur. I suppose David Corbett is phosphorus, but now we have sulphur, and Lauren's going to step up to the plate on biostimulants, I think, and stuff like that. So the team is really coming together. We're delighted to have Bodie on board, as I said, and I suppose it's more important now than ever that we have lots of expertise and horsepower on the technical side, especially because things are changing so much. There's massive changes coming there in relation to the fertiliser register, the banding, nitrates, you name it. Big challenges. So I suppose getting the nutrients right is very, very important. I'm just looking here at the Climate Action Plan for 2021, a progress report there. They just got a side of it. Some of the headline figures is that chemical N usage is down 14% from 2021, which is understandable based on cost, if nothing else. P down 26%, K is down 24%. There's no mention of sulphur, but I'm sure it's probably down in a similar proportion, or maybe even worse, because at the start of the year when everyone was panicking about nitrogen, they weren't worried, maybe, Claire, but it obviously has a very important role in regulating the efficiency of nitrogen as well.
Yes, sulphur does, especially on the lighter soils, that's more inclined to be sulphur deficiency, that if you applied your sulphur with it, that could help with your nitrogen use efficiency, because nitrogen and sulphur work very close together. So when sulphur is there in adequate amounts, it can help uptake more of that nitrogen and get more back from your nitrogen fertiliser, instead of it being more leached through the soil. So sulphur does have a very important role there, especially on the maybe more lighter soils that is more inclined to be sulphur deficient.
Definitely, and even soils coming out of tillage would be a massive one as well, wouldn't it, Claire?
Yeah, because they'd be taking more out of it, and the tillage crops tend to need more sulphur anyway, so the more high yield and more demanding crops will take more sulphur out. So if it's not replaced, then you're not getting maybe as much of your nitrogen fertiliser maybe as also.
Air quality has improved with the catalytic converters, which means that we're not getting as much sulphur deposition.
That's exactly, yeah. So through regulations in the air emissions emissions. So sulphur dioxide was coming from the industry, and maybe sulphur deposition onto the soils, that's where the sulphur supply was coming from for decades. Now for the last couple of decades, with the cleaner air, less pollution in the air with sulphur dioxide, there's less sulphur deposition on the soil, so therefore we need to be more mindful of how much we put in from fertilizers maybe.
Yeah, and just matching that is a big thing. And I suppose back in James's day, there was probably not an issue, but it's probably all news to Jim. But I suppose it is very, very important. And basically, what we're doing with sulphur, we're supplying kind of two amino acids that aren't in nitrogen that are very important, Claire. Is that a good summary? Or
so nitrogen and sulphur work together. So you need sulphur is a part of the two amino acids, methionine and cytosine, and without them, nitrogen is not able to convert those into true proteins. So the plant won't be able to use the nitrogen there, instead of it being like a poor quality nitrogen without the sulphur. So it'd be like more free amino acids in the plant.
It's a big one, because like effectively we're spreading nitrogen to get it into the plant, drive photosynthesis, and provide protein to animals as well. But it's something that we're becoming more aware of, I would argue, is protein and protein quality. Previously we just looked at crude protein, but I suppose that is going to have a big impact on the PDIE and PDIA as well. Is that fair, of supplying adequate sulphur, especially to grass or silage grass? Yeah,
exactly, John. So when you supply the sulphur in adequate amounts, it'll be able to convert that into more quality protein. So the animals consuming it will be able to get more from the nitrogen that's in the plant, instead of it being like maybe toxic nitrogen, it'd be more better quality of nitrogen, and change those into true proteins.
And it's a big one, I think, that we're maybe possibly missing out in relation to the clover debate.
So clover, the sulphur has a big impact in that clover using to be able to fix the nitrogen, and to be able for the clover plant to be able to fix the nitrogen, it needs that sulphur. So it mightn't necessarily be able to fix the nitrogen without the sulphur. So those nodules need sulphur more than maybe like a perennial ryegrass crop.
Yeah, and it's massive, and we're not doing that.
No.
And we're kind of taking it that, and that's why we've developed the Clover Boost range that are quite I suppose, strong in sulphur, with 5%, because we're fixing obviously nitrogen from the atmosphere, but we're not fixing any sulphur, and it's still the same principles of agronomy and plant physiology, I'm sure, Claire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the plant mightn't necessarily be able to fix as much nitrogen as could be capable without adequate sulphur there in the soil. So it's very important.
And this is a tenuous one, but in my head it makes sense. But if we're having maybe, if it is fixing nitrogen and we're not supplying sufficient sulphur, and it's not turning it into utilisable forms of protein, then you are potentially leading yourself into higher or elevated risks of bloat or nitrates poisoning, obviously. That could be an antagonistic, so it's definitely a massive one. And I think that, while next year we're definitely planning on having been very proactive in promoting potash, I think sulphur goes hand in hand beside that as well, Claire.
Yeah, I would agree with that, John. Yeah.
And even maybe earlier sulphur is something that we haven't really discussed. They used to back in James's day just say it was a second cut silage issue,
Yeah.
And I remember my father telling me, and it would be real heavy ground where we are in Kilmaley, that one year the grass just stopped growing in June, and they couldn't figure it out, and they went out with sulphur and it took off. But it was late. Typically people used to think about it later, but we need to start maybe introducing sulphur a little bit earlier. Is that?
I'd say so, yeah, especially maybe on the more lighter soils, and the sulphur could have leached throughout the winter.
Yes.
So you could, on the lighter soils, apply a bit more sulphur earlier on, but not too early, as again, if it was heavy raining, sulphur tends to leach. It won't stay in the soil if it's not being used by the plant.
Yeah, I actually think, John, just one point that you mentioned there about your father saying that they stopped growing grass in June, and then they went out with sulphur and they got a good burst of grass. Around my area, Carlow, Kilkenny kind of area, there's a lot of farmers that know a lot about sulphur, but then there's also a lot of farmers that don't know as much about sulphur. Yes. Some farmers wouldn't realise that if they're on a sandy soil that they need to go with that little bit extra. They need to be a little bit more careful because it can be leached quicker. So I think getting more information out there about sulphur, and I do think farmers are becoming more aware of how important sulphur is for nitrogen use efficiency.
Definitely. And even from the green fields, which would be kind of in the middle of your area used to be, Lauren, they found that soil coming out of tillage into grass, sulphur had a massive influence on production. But maybe what I might ask you as well is, like, you're after a year there, we see that in this report that lime usage is up significantly, so it's up to 1.33 million tonnes, up 49% from 2020, which is brilliant. But did you have many of your clients spreading lime this year, Lauren, or was it a big priority?
Yeah, so look, there's been a lot of talk about lime the last 2 years really, and lime has been around forever. You know, we're all sick of hearing about it really, but look, it all comes back to basics, right? You know yourselves, soil fertility is the biggest part of grassland management and getting your P's and K's right and your pH number one. But yeah, lime applications have really increased, especially in my area there. I suppose farmers who would have been maybe on a heavier soil would have felt that if they went with lime, it would have kind of nearly burnt up the ground, or it would have got quite heavy. Like John, you would have been saying that around Clare as well, you would have had the same, that kind of this old kind of a tail.
Soften the land or boil the land.
Exactly. But I think farmers are becoming more aware of how important it is at the moment, and like that report there just reflects on how much of a push there is on soil fertility. And look, it's all coming back to water quality and everything at the moment, but no, there definitely is a push on trying to improve our soil fertility, get our P's and K's where we want them. And like that, we know that if your pH isn't right, you're not going to get efficiency of our nitrogen, our potassium, our sulphur, like you were saying, Claire.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely critically important to get the basics right, and I couldn't agree with you more, Lauren. Like, it's vital to just get out there and get the lime done. Like, but even looking into this, and this is maybe a specialist subject, or a subject that you're very passionate about, Lauren, is slurry, which is surprising. But less usage has gone up, 4% up, from 2018. But that's very, very good to see that farmers are adopting those technologies.
Yeah, no, look, it is.
What I find very interesting here, guys, when we look at, nitrate directives and everything, but everything you've just listed out there, from sulphur, lime, soil health, clover, P's and K's, slurry management, all very basic techniques that we can do to manage and reduce the need for N, and maximise and release as much out of the ground. While all the pressures are on to reduce our N usage for water quality, etc., there's so many tools there, but getting them right is the big thing. And how do we balance all these things to kind of manage it, that it's not just, I'm just going to go with lime. Like, it's a real full suite of all the tools there. Like, Lauren, based on what you've seen there in the last year, you've probably seen a huge journey that farming has come on, this huge appetite for knowledge transfer, fertiliser planning and all. Like, is there any few points you'd like to make on that?
Yeah, look, like what you were saying, James, there, we're just going back to basics, like liming, getting our P's, our K's, clover management correct. And yeah, look, out on farm at the moment, farmers have been hit with a lot. There's no doubt in saying they haven't been, between the new allowances coming down the line, the register, everything for animal health, the vaccination, everything. They've been hit with a lot. But I suppose where we come into play at Grassland Agro on the sustainability programme has a huge part to play in helping with that knowledge transfer, providing support to farmers on getting the basics right, our grassland management advice, our fertiliser planning, getting your soil samples done, making sure they're up to date, and having someone like our agronomists to help and to interpret that information clearer is a massive help. But there has been a massive shift in farmers' mindset, in the sense that they know there's a lot coming down the line. They know that they need to get kind of on board with it. They're reaching out for the support from agronomists. They have a lot of derogation teagasc webinars going on. But there is a lot going on farm. And
I think Lauren, we work together with a farmer in Laois there, a beef farm, and that's nearly one of the most enjoyable ones that we go to. But I suppose it's very important that we don't just focus on dairy. It's nearly every enterprise we need to get better at, tillage included. Sheep, you name it. Like, there's a lot that we need to do as an industry, and it's going to take that little bit of help and advice probably, you know, to people actually to help farmers through, because the amount of information and the changes are massive. Like, you know, there's so much going on from a legislation point of view with the banding and stuff like that, but even from an agronomy point of view, like adopting clover is not simple. Like, do you have any clover at home, Claire? Or?
We'd have a small bit of clover. We were starting to include more clover into different fields
when you're reseeding.
When we're reseeding, yeah. And this year he's seen that the clover actually, my father's seen the clover took off really well and grew really well. I suppose maybe with the higher temperatures and the soil fertility was actually fairly good, and the clover did very, very well for him.
Did he pull back the nitrogen a little bit because of price as well?
Exactly, yeah. He pulled back the nitrogen. Yeah.
That probably helped as well. Like, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I see that with a lot of my farmers. Like, we would have been pulling back on the nitrogen a good bit from a financial perspective, but obviously because of the legislation that's coming down the line. But like that, they were all saying that clover's just after taking off, do you know?
Yeah, and Lauren, one of the farmers that you were working very closely with is actually Philip Tyndall, who won a big award there from the Grass 10, and brilliant to see. But he's probably making a big stab at clover as well. Yeah,
Philip and John down in Bunclody there, or Baldagan, should I say, they're doing a great job down there. Philip, I'm giving Philip an official shout out here on the Sod Pod now that he's due to come on. Overdue, should I say, Philip. Look, what Philip and John have done down there over the last couple of years has been amazing. Their soil fertility is well and truly where they want to be at optimum, and they're after really embracing clover and new technologies to help them get to that optimum soil fertility. And like we seen when we were down there, John, at the Grass Tent Open Day, like the covers that they have down there, the facilities they have, the work that's after going into it is second to none, really.
There was grass out over the ditches, in fairness, wasn't there?
Yeah,
like, and it was,
no, there was, in fairness to them.
And like they would have suffered during the drought. Probably it's dry, it's south facing, it's naturally free drain, so like they would have suffered. But having the good soil fertility there, even the good biology, we were actually digging holes in it, and there was really good soil structure there as well, Lauren. Like.
Yeah, no, their soil structure is very, very good, and like you can see that it's standing to them. Like we would have over the last couple of years built up a bank of soil biology, Solvita testing and soil structure testing with our grass vets to assess each and every field. And even if we came across a field that wasn't optimum or that we thought needed assessing with soil structure, John and Philip were very, very good for adhering to what I was recommending and how they could improve it. They were constantly trying to better themselves, but like the clover establishment there was second to none, and that's partly down to how good their soil structure is. Do you know, they're doing really well down there.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And I actually I don't think we touched on this, James, but we were in Grange there not so long ago, and thanks very much to Nikki and Peter and all the team up there, but they had achieved really good results with oversown clover as well. And it's great to see that, you know, when you put something new like the Clover Boost out there, people take it up and it'll deliver. So that's very important. But in the scheme of it, like in relation to John and Philip, I suppose they're trying to put in clover. They're really good at managing grass, and you need to be really good at managing grass clover as well, Lauren. Like you have to be really on top of it and keep not carry maybe too much covers over the winter. Isn't that fair?
Yeah, no, exactly. And like what Philip and John are doing down there, like they're kind of slowly building up their farm for clover. Some paddocks have 10% clover, some have 20, some have 30, and it's all about managing the grassland management for that, managing how the animals graze it, and as well as that, like they're making sure, like John, what you were saying, not letting covers get too high. When the covers get too high in a clover sward, a grass clover sward, light can't be allowed into the base of the sward, and the clover just gets swallowed up and can't develop. So making sure that they're going in grazing at a low enough cover, maybe a 900 cover to start off with, and then letting it build up, and then second grazing they're allowing the clover to develop on.
Yeah, light is nearly a nutrient with clover, like, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
And Claire, one big one is like the red clover, right? We're saying, you know, just spread 0730, But it's the same thing. We still need to supply sulphur nutrition to that.
Exactly, yeah. Without the sulphur, then the sulphur there is there to help to fix that nitrogen, and the plant, if sulphur is not there, it won't be able to fix as much its full potential of nitrogen.
And that message isn't out there though.
No, it's not.
And it's very important because like we, we're looking at all the positives, the upside to red clover, but we need to get better at treating these like crops, really, don't we?
Yes, exactly.
A higher level of attention to detail. Like.
Yeah.
And you'd see that maybe as well, that, in relation to some of the plots that we see with grass and red clover, that maybe or even fields of it, the grass can look very hungry as well, like, and we're not supplying the adequate nutrition in sulphur, phosphorus or potash. That's going to be the case going forward. Like,
when I hear all this talk, I suppose we've got 47 advisors today on farm giving advice, and like when we talk about sulphur, lime, soil health, etc. John, like, you were one of the key engineers, and some would say you must have had some crystal ball, but you knew what was coming when you built the soil sustainability program at that time. All of these topics are covered. Our advisors are out today, and it's not about fertiliser. It's about tailored plans in the field-specific programs. But every scenario we've covered, way back in 2019 when you built this program, all these topics were covered: slurry, P's and K's, clover, soil health, lime, sulphur. Like, so you knew where this was going. You had the foresight to be one of the key engineers. And like, I suppose when we hear Lauren's experience here of what she's dealing with on farm, and all our other 46 other advisors out there as well, what do you see next, John, with that crystal ball?
Well, I'm a little bit taken aback by those kind words by Jim.
Don't make his head grow any bigger.
Read your head right there, John.
You left out a bit about Clare hurling or Clare going to win the All-Ireland next year. No, listen, I think that we continue on the journey. I do think that like companion crops like plantain are going to be probably going to play a role. I think that we're going to have to get better at supplying trace elements like boron and sulphur to these swards. Everyone's probably sick of me going on about boron, but it's absolutely critical in nodulation and fixing nitrogen. I think we need to get more in tune with looking at our offtakes as well. It's something that we've tried to do, but we really need to account for, where the silage is going, where the slurry is going, taking that into account and monitoring that in our fertiliser plan, so we know that nitrogen and phosphorus has been allocated in organic and mineral forms, because obviously there's sulphur even in slurry as well, Claire, but that's probably in a more organic form and it needs to be mineralised.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's probably the same, and it's getting more in tune with the soil health. So where I see it going is that we're working with our colleagues to develop our own apps and whatnot, is to have a really good understanding of the mineralisation curve of nitrogen, phosphorus and sulphur on every farm that we work with, and then we know the demand based on our stocking rate and how much ground is closed and stuff like that, and that we're able to fine tune the nitrogen that needs to be applied in chemical nitrogen. Because I suppose when you look at maybe the future of and I was actually in with the Grass 150 group as well, brilliant group, like some of the top lads, and one thing that I talked for ages, but the one message they took out of it is that there's 150 kilos of nitrogen being fixed by clover, 150 from chemical and 150 from the soil. If we can get better at understanding, if maybe we can get 200 from the soil, 300 from the soil, I think that's where we're going forward. What would you think? Would you...
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything else I missed out in there?
No, I'd agree. And even you've seen at the moment, it's very mild at the moment. Well, it's starting to get colder now, but maybe 2-3 weeks ago there.
Yeah, you'd be sweating, yeah.
Yeah, and there was farmers that were still growing 30 kilos. And they couldn't get over how they were growing so much grass, and it was so mild out. There was so much mineralisation going on in the soil. There was so much biological activity that grass was being grown from your biological activity. So I think farmers are slowly becoming more aware that yes, we actually can get a lot of nitrogen out of the soil from mineralisation. So I think tapping into that a little bit more, making ourselves more aware that there is a lot of labile nitrogen there, and that we can tap into that to help reduce the chemical nitrogen that we are spreading.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree there with Lauren. Yeah, and I suppose keeping the soil structure to get that nitrogen mineralised in the soil structure and soil fertility is going to help to release that nitrogen from the soil. And I suppose farmers probably slurry is there on farms, like to get the most out of the slurry, their organic manures, without having to supply chemical nitrogen. Then might reduce that. Definitely,
yeah. Great points, and the structure is a huge one because we know from the soil sustainability program we're not probably, and you've probably seen that, Lauren. I'm just going to ask you now before we finish up, like when you see what is a root map 1 and a VES of 1, like versus some of the ones that you've seen, like there's some probably challenges to soil structure on farm.
Yeah, like the difference is massive, John. Like, you know, you're looking at a root mat of 1 and you're looking at a root mat of 2. A root mat of 1 is just really fibrous. It looks really healthy. You know, it gets down really deep into the soil structure. And even like when I bring out a farmer to look at his soil structure, we go out, we dig down into the sod. We might look at an area that is compacted, maybe at a gate and somewhere in the middle of the field. And there's a massive difference. Like, they're really intrigued to see how their soil structure differs based on an area that is compact and that isn't compact, typically compact. And like it's massive. Like they'd even see straight off, not even looking at the soil structure, when you point it out to them, the level of yield that they're growing there. But when you dig down and you look at the soil structure, farmers are just really interested. It's making them aware of getting out on farm, digging, assessing, seeing, even if they're going to reseed, seeing if they actually do need to, is there an iron pan? Do they need to plough? Could they get away with tail or direct drill or oversown or something if there's...
They're available from Stanley contracts.
Stanley Agri, I know. Yeah, no, look, there's a massive difference, and farmers are becoming way more aware of soil structure, and having the likes of our agronomy advisors out on farm looking at that is really helping things.
Lauren and Claire, thanks so much for joining Johnny and myself here today. It was a really interesting conversation. I'm sure we'll be back on again to figure out what parts are we editing out of this and what parts are we leaving in.
Thanks very much,
Thanks
James.
very much, yeah, James.
No bother. And I suppose, look, the way I'm going to summarise the end of that call today, there's lots of education and information and pressures hitting farmers. But if we break it down and we look at our sulphur and our lime and our soil health, clover, P's and K's and slurries, they're all simplified topics, part of the greater picture, incorporating them into the all-inclusive nutrient management plans and fertiliser plans. And if you want to speak to any of our Grassland Agro advisors, reach out. As say, we 47 of them. Mind yourself out there. Farm smart, farm safe. Hey, thanks for listening to the Sod Pod. We hope you enjoyed it. To find out more, head over to www.grasslandagro.ie or check out our social channels: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's all for this episode. See you next time.